Today, our speaker is Bill Hensley, and he's going to be reviewing the book, The Last Days of Night by Graham Moore. And I think everybody knows Bill, but maybe Bill will tell us a little bit more about himself if he would like to. And may I introduce Bill to us.
Well, I was one of the city architects for 23 years. I love architecture, science, especially physics, math, talking. Well, I am. Went to Texas A&M. My parents used to come to this religiously. Hal and Jenny Hensley. My dad was an engineer who would teach his profs how to do the calculus better. So I tried to do a little of that myself too. When Anne asked me to present this book, I thought, oh, this is a great opportunity. Let's see. It's about Tesla and Thomas Edison, and I was excited to delve into the science of energy and power. It isn't just that kind of power, though. Well, the book's cover tells it well. It's from Graham Moore, the Oscar-winning screenwriter of The Imitation Game and best-selling writer of The Sherlockian. It becomes a thrilling novel based on actual events about the nature of genius, the cost of ambition, and the battle to electrify America. This was a true battle, for whoever prevailed would get all the marbles to empower America. Before the turn of the last century, gas lamps prevailed. When Anne asked me to review this book, I was excited to delve into the science of energy and power. But it isn't just that kind of power that drives the story. It's the search for political power to energize our entire civilization. The first half of the first sentence grabs you. On the day that he would first meet Thomas Edison, what fun. This book will remind me of that old movie about young Thomas Edison who's tinkering around with stuff all the time and learning Morse code, and he uses it to telegraph ahead to tell the train that's coming that the bridge is washed out, and so saves a lot of lives. But the sentence ends with horror. On the day that he would first meet Thomas Edison, Paul watched a man burn alive in the sky above Broadway. As the man tried to untangle electrical wires, he grabbed 2 live wires. The second shock of Paul's day was actually being summoned to the audience with Thomas Edison to learn that Edison was filing 312 lawsuits against his client, George Westinghouse, for working to try to improve light bulbs and electrical systems. I made the first one that worked, so it's mine. They're all mine. Sounds like Thomas Edison was no Mickey Rooney. Perhaps overkill was Edison's primary life strategy. In litigation as well as inventing, he would try every different possibility to get the invention right. It served him well as he tried hundreds of different filaments for his light bulb to find the one that would glow without burning out. His genius was persistence. Have you heard his quotes? I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that don't work. Many of life's failures are people who did not realize how close they were to success when they gave up. I've seen these on mugs. And especially, genius is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. That became his obsession. He'd try, his engineers would complain that if he wanted to invent a table, he would say, okay, we'll try 1 leg. Oh, it falls over. How about 2? It still tips over. How about 3? Triangulation. Well, that stables it. Well, how about 4? Is that better? Yes, better in all directions. Well, how about 5, 6, 7? Those add stability in very much decreasing amounts. If you put too many legs on, you might have trouble putting your own legs in between them. Actually, that's my extension of the metaphor. Edison had a flair for the dramatic. He showed Paul the Statue of Liberty's torch that night, glowing in the darkness, miles away, and clicked it off with a button. He wanted to control everybody's light. Edison needed power for light, for politics, and control. Now, Paul Cravath, the lawyer, came from a family of crusaders. His father had started Oberlin College to help educate the black free men after the Civil War. He brought that up when there was some prejudicial talk at a dinner that George Westinghouse had invited him to in order to observe him. Westinghouse was impressed. He needed a fighter. He was being sued for improving the light bulb. Edison said, "I invented it. Anyone else has to pay me a royalty to tinker with it or be sued." What an impediment to progress in any field that would be. Paul said, "Well, I once won a $275,000 lawsuit." Wow. But Edison was suing for $1 billion. If you can't outshine the competition, then bury them with litigation. How can we beat that? Maybe we need a spy. Paul made a deal with a recently fired engineer who had an axe to grind about Edison, Reginald Fessenden. Explained Edison's invention factory. He'd say, "We're going to build a light bulb. Here are all the ways people have tried and didn't work. Now let you lot find a way that works." And 50 of them would try for a year. He mentioned one engineer, though, an awful jerk who Edison had fired 3 years before, who couldn't get along with anybody, with a terrible accent you could barely understand, and when you finally understood what he was saying, you didn't know what he was talking about. Nikola Tesla, a real oddball. Tesla, that's a name we've been hearing recently. Tesla autos and big rigs with incredible mileage. Tesla solar collecting roof tiles that my son wanted me to put on our house. When Paul reported back, Westinghouse replied he'd heard of him and had some obscure schematic designs that Tesla was going to demonstrate in a few weeks at Columbia College, Paul's alma mater. So they went. Tesla, 6.5 feet tall, shockingly thin, with greased black hair parted in the middle, was dragged onto the stage by Thomas Martin, his would-be patron, who introduced him with the words, "Our guest of honor does not want to be here. Nikola Tesla is a genius and a deeply private man. However, he has allowed himself to be convinced that he should share his genius. I present to you my friend and colleague, Nikola Tesla. He has something he would not like to tell you." Tesla ascended the steps, hands in pockets, turned and stared off into the distance. He finally spoke. "Please pardon my face. My pallor is white as a pale. My health is in a condition dishabille." He spoke very softly. I'm speaking loud so you can hear it, but this will help too. It seemed like he tossed his words up into the air, everything he knew on a subject, and didn't stay to see where it landed. "Laboratories are better to fit places for machines than personages, but I am digressed. The notice I received for tonight's lecture was rather small, and I have not been able to treat the subject so extensively as I desired. My health, as I have said, I ask your kind indulgence, and my gratification shall be in your minor approvals." And with that, he left. Hey, perhaps he should have used some Toastmasters training. I don't know. If you want that, come tonight to my club. Thomas Martin tried to save his moment and calm the crowd. Suddenly, Tesla appeared, dragging a 4-wheel cart with a long black cloth atop it. "The subject on which I have the pleasure of carrying for you notices is a novel system of electrical distribution and power transmission," said he quietly. Alternating currents are the basis of my system's use as they afford advantages particular over the direct currents common to the terrain in this age and a day. I am confident that I will at once establish the superior adaptability of these currents to both to the transmission of power and to the ways of motors. Shouts of disbelief filled the hall. Alternating current? What's that? He yanked the cloth down, revealing 3 metal devices about twice the size of typewriters, coiled with wires, hollow tubes, and strange wheels. Forgiveness for me, it seems that explanations are ordered. With that, he turned around and began scribbling equations across the 10-foot wide chalkboard. Each time he did another line, there were explanations and aghast people. Do you know what all this means? Paul asked Westinghouse, who replied, I'm not sure anyone does. Is he multiplying k, the cosine of what? U? Paul replied, what's a cosine? Westinghouse didn't want to miss it to explain, but Paul asked for the big picture. What are those machines? For God's sake, one's a generator, another's a motor, and the other is a stepping down transformer. Paul said, so what? The upshot of his explanation is that Tesla had developed a way to harness electrical current that alternated back and forth instead of just one way, and could be transmitted over long distance because it would not build up the heat resistance that continued direct current generates. Electricity, it's a force of nature. Only God knows why current is generated when 2 magnets cross each other. But man has discovered that it could be used to generate heat and light. Well, long ago, I discovered you could rub your feet on a carpet and generate a little bit of heat. But it would only go short distance along wiring when directly applied. Tesla was providing the on-off switching of direction of the current that would make it possible to transmit over long distances, solving the basic distance problem they were all facing, making it possible to electrify the country. But who could stand the continuous flicker of on-off light? Tesla tamed it with a third part, a commutator or transformer, between the generator and the motor or light bulb, smoothing the output. Here in America, we use 60 cycles per second. You've heard that. In Europe, it's 50. Don't mix your equipment up with the wrong source, or you'll blow it out. Paul was sure that Tesla would want to avoid the hordes of engineers who would be vying for his attention after the speech. But since Paul went to that college, he knew the back way out for Tesla to escape. And bingo, there he was. Mr. Tesla, Martin tried to pull Tesla along. Mr. Tesla, I work for George Westinghouse, and we'd like to offer you a special opportunity. Both stopped to listen at Westinghouse's name. I know you've had some unpleasant experiences with Thomas Edison in the past. How would you feel for an opportunity for revenge? He could tell by the upturn of Tesla's lips that he was interested. Dinner at Delmonico's with Tesla. Paul makes small talk, while Tesla is visually calculating the volume of the lobster and sauce together. 140 cubic centimeters of broth minus the disposition by the tail of the lobster, divisible. I cannot eat this. It is not divisible by 3. When Tesla asked for a raise of $7 a week, Edison had laughed at him. The woods are full of men like you, Tesla, and I can have any number of them for $18 a week. Tesla walked out and never came back. Paul slid a check for $50,000 over to Tesla. That's 50. Do you know what the best revenge is, Mr. Tesla? Success. Tesla forgot to take the money. Paul chased him down and was thanked only half-heartedly. How can people not like money? Tell me, Patrice. Maybe when they're thinking about more important things? At the Tesla welcome dinner at Westinghouse's place, Marguerite was there to soothe if Tesla did anything odd. Upon greeting her, he found a long silver hair on his sleeve, shrieked, was grossed out, and had to leave. After that, he stayed in his lab all the time, ate nothing but saltines and water. The 7 braised pork shoulders they tried to serve him were refused because they were not divisible by 3. No weekly progress meetings were attended. Meanwhile, back at Paul's office, a world-famous opera singer, Agnes Huntington, needed Paul's help in a contract dispute. He couldn't afford the time and offered his other staff. Her mom took her away in a huff. Oh, but she was so beautiful. An Evening Post article, "Death in the Wires." Brought to you by that villain, George Westinghouse. There is no significant reason to prefer alternating current over direct current. In fact, AC runs at double the voltage of DC. Only devious merchants of death would want to make an extra dollar off the naive and gullible. The main proponent of this deadly system is George Westinghouse. Why would the Evening Post print such a bald-faced lie, since alternating current is safer? Well, they just received 2,000 shares of Edison General Electric stock. Ladies and gentlemen, be careful what you ask for. Paul asks Westinghouse to explain how AC is safer. Reginald Fessenden comes to help demonstrate the answer. He brings a small generator attached to something called a capacitor. After he cranks a handle, Westinghouse asks Paul to grab both open ends of cable. Won't it electrocute me? Yes, 110 volts of alternating current will shoot through your body. You don't trust me? Okay. Ow! Don't try this at home. What have we learned? 110 volts is no problem if the power is low and it alternates and it lets you go. Don't try it with a pacemaker either. Direct current will lock your muscles so you can't let go. Since Edison couldn't develop a superior product, he developed a better story. Paul, you've underestimated the villainy of Thomas Edison. Tesla wires Westinghouse saying, tires of Westinghouse. He's no inventor, just somebody who makes things by combining other people's inventions. Westinghouse says Tesla is a jerk. What do you make? I have thoughts. In my imaginings, they will last longer and drive deeper into the next centuries than shall your fragile toys. Westinghouse, the many things I have built will last for ages. No, Mr. Westinghouse. Buildings are ephemeral. It is ideas that last forever. The author's comment. Throughout, he does these comments that kind of summarizes a profound thought. Paul meditated the wars of men who devoted their lives to creating things from thin air. But such different things. Westinghouse created objects. Tesla created ideas, while Edison, a few miles away, was busy creating an empire. Paul was not one of them, so he could see them remotely. 3 great giants in the misty distance. 3 entirely incompatible ways of approaching science, industry, and business. So Tesla left, and Paul soon found that the patent deal he had negotiated with Tesla was actually to pay him royalties in perpetuity, even if he's not working for Westinghouse. Oops. Now Paul needs Agnes Huntington's help and offers to help her with her lawsuit. He quotes a very low fee and asks a favor for Agnes to take him to a ritzy party being thrown for Tesla. She is thrilled to have an evening out from her mother's thumb. She knows everybody there and helps Paul get upstairs to the private showing off of the latest entertainment. Tesla is explaining electricity. Electricity arises from nowhere. It is not created, it is harnessed. From where does water come? It is. When men learned to heat it and direct the clouds that flew above the hot water, there you have it, power. Does Tesla have a friend, they say? Agnes interrupts. Might we give the old boys a minute to talk? And draws the crowd away from Paul and Tesla by promising to sing. Tesla asks, "What is it you are doing here, Mr. Paul Cravath?" "I've been trying to reach out to you. We should talk." "If you come into my new laboratory tomorrow night, there are magnificent wonders to be seen." "Paul, you've invented something new?" Tesla leaned in to whisper, "It is a wireless telephone." Paul stared dumbly. Telephones had existed only for a decade. They were expensive, and almost nobody had one. Why would anybody want a wireless telephone? After the singing, the crowd engulfed Tesla again, and Paul left. Agnes caught him outside. "I don't think you liked the party." "Or was it the guests?" Paul said. "They're horrid." I'm sorry, thank you for bringing me." She asks, "Did you get what you needed from your friend?" "They're going to devour him. He's too naive, too innocent, and they're wolves batting at a piece of meat between their paws." Her response is sardonic. Stanford White is using Tesla for a laugh. Edwin Booth is using Stanford for rehabilitation. I'm using Edwin for a night away from my mother, and you're using me to get in the door. It's the transactional circle on which the whole world spins. Paul found his way into Tesla's building, and eventually found his way to Tesla's new laboratory. He entered a black room. "Nikola, are you in there?" A shuffling and a creaking sound. "I shall not illuminate you with mere light, Mr. Cravath. I shall instead do so by electrical storm." Suddenly, swirls of lightning swirled around him with a cacophony of sizzling sounds. Tesla later demonstrated cathode ray tubes, too. Paul said, "He should tell the world about this." "I am telling you." "But I don't understand it." "Perhaps that's why I am telling you." Paul tries to get Tesla to come back, but instead, the building they're in erupts in flames. Paul drifts in and out for weeks. He eventually recovers enough to realize he is a person of interest in the fire, interviewed multiple times by the chief of police. And nobody knows where Tesla is, or even if he still is. The mayor has made this his top priority. "You have powerful friends looking for you. Please tell Mr. Westinghouse I'm grateful." "Who?" "No, Mr. Edison called the mayor himself to make sure we have our best people on this." Paul asks Tesla's attorney, who accuses Paul of trying to attempt to murder Tesla. Finally, Agnes sends him word to come to her dressing room at the Metropolitan Opera House. Tesla has come to her there. Where can we hide him? Who can we trust? Nobody. Well, her mother won't like it, but nobody would expect their place. Tesla lies in bed, eats saltines and water, and goes on his vision. "Ships," said Tesla. "The particles that are moving, sliding, pressing up against. They're like tiny ships. We must see what they bring. We must trace the waters of their journey. Particles, they are ships only, are they not? I will make a machine to push them into the waters, to connect one port with another. I cannot believe no one has thought of it previous. It is obvious when you have seen the boats." "You're hallucinating, Nikola," said Paul. "No," replied Tesla with a grin. "I'm inventing." A new machine? Is it a flash of light? Like Paul on the road to Damascus? Like for his alternating motor, Tesla has a series of hallucinatory episodes, and then there it is, his device is invented, and he moves on to something else, and he often doesn't think there's a reason to build it. He already knows it'll work. Agnes is there. She said, "But you haven't invented something until you've built it. If I spend an afternoon staring down at sheet music and imagining how I'm to sing it, it cannot be said that I performed the piece. I don't actually create the thing until I stand on stage and move my voice. My throat gets a bit tired, and applause tends to happen at the end. It's different for him. Agnes says, just saying that you've invented something is not the same as inventing it. I think Mr. Westinghouse would agree with you, says Paul. Later, Paul's employees greet him at the office. What if Mr. Edison believes that saying you're inventing something is just as good as inventing it? Invalidate Edison's patent, and then Edison and Westinghouse can each produce the kind of light bulbs they want. That's going to take a lot of work to do all the research to prove Edison had perjured himself on his patents for materials for patent number 223898 had 3 pages, an ink drawing on it, and 2 and 3 had explanations. Numerous pages of clarification came for years, materials about other relevant patents, interviews, articles, pamphlets about it. Paul went to Columbia University for interns, associate attorneys, work half days until graduation, then full days. Meanwhile, Paul and Westinghouse penned articles about the relative safety of AC instead of DC. But the new year brought Dr. Harold Brown's grotesque roadshow to show how DC would only hurt a dog, but AC would painfully electrocute it to death. The real unspoken difference in these demonstrations was the degree of power behind the sparks. A series of such trials culminated in Edison electrocuting a rogue circus elephant in front of a huge crowd. Her name was Topsy. It took forever. Paul broke the law and broke into Dr. Brown's laboratory. To seek his credentials, he found a design for an electric chair and Brown's letters with Edison conspiring to use Westinghouse's AC as the means for human execution. On returning, Paul's associate attorneys met him at the door. Well, sir, I think we've got him. He lied on his patent. The whole problem was getting the filament right. I think the patent said cotton. Edison told the press platinum. It looks like bamboo. Atop the stack of documents is a folder. That is the interview with Thomas Edison in the New York Sun from October 20th, 1878. In it, he says, this lamp is hollowed out glass bulb in a vacuum with platinum filaments. The filament is the part that glows. And if you watch the movie about Edison, that was the big deal, was finding the right filament. 1880 refers to a glass bulb hollowed out in a vacuum with a cotton filament inside. He changed the filament for the patent, because 1880 was the patent. So what? The filament was the key to getting it to work and keep working. But announcing that he had solved it caused the others to give up while he kept refining. So he first told the press it was platinum. Then he told the patent office it was cotton, but it's actually bamboo? Yes. He was just making things up. He actually got the bulb working with bamboo years later after the patent was granted. He gave demonstrations. People could come in for a minute and watch the light turn on, and he'd have them leave, probably before it burned out. Here's a quote from the deposition of Edison. Everybody steals in science and industry. I've stolen a lot myself. But I know how to steal. They don't know how to steal. Thomas Edison. 2 months later, though, the court ruled against Westinghouse. One more crisis. Agnes's mother insists that Tesla can no longer stay in their house. He must be gone in 4 days. Potential in-laws are coming to vet Agnes's family. So Tesla has to go. Make that a double crisis. Paul had his own hopes for Agnes. A week later, she accompanied Paul as he took Tesla home to his parents in Nashville. The family home had fallen into a state of comfortable dishabille. Paul's parents were gracious. His father addresses Tesla. Would you like me to show you your room? Tesla responds, the universe wears coats. The universe wears shirts. The universe shall be unbuttoned. His mom says, we'll get him well. Agnes, have you ever seen someone so alone? He's the emperor of his own private kingdom. He's his only inhabitant, yes. So that makes him its slave as well. This leads to her own admissions of her own life of slavery to her image. Much of it is successful fabrication, predicated by leaving their poverty of America behind, creating an image of prima donna with a fancy new dress and a new name. It succeeded due to her incredible singing talent and gifts from admirers as she conquered Europe. Oops, Paul has to go. He just saw an article about a wife murder in Buffalo about to be executed by electric chair. He argued with the court and lost. He told them they should use DC. I won't describe the actual human criminal's execution using that system. But it took 4 long, agonizing attempts before he finally didn't revive again, using 1,000 volts of power. So AC was ineffective because it kept alternating back and forth. He could have let go had his hands not been tied down. So they tortured the man because Dr. Brown and guess who, Edison, insisted on giving Westinghouse's AC a black eye with a unit that was illegally acquired from Westinghouse. Paul objected. Oh no, Charles Coffin had his own electric company, came forward to show a license that he was allowed to sell to whoever he wanted. Brown told Paul, consider this payback for kicking in my door. Meanwhile, the New York Times soon read, electrical atrocity in Buffalo. Is Edison to blame? When Paul visits Westinghouse with the news, he finds him almost bankrupt. Banks are failing all over the world, so everyone will want their loans back. With Westinghouse's home included, they might be able to pay most of it. In the midst of it, Paul receives a very odd telegram. He seems to get odd messages. To come home. The Tennessee sunflowers have bloomed. They're a most beautiful sight. You must see them for yourself. Please come to Nashville post haste, signed A.G. What was Agnes up to? Where's Tesla? That's a great greeting. He's been writing letters to Wilhelm Röntgen in Würzburg. Agnes and his dad take him to his father's Fisk College for Blacks to see Tesla's latest laboratory in the basement. What is it you've created here, said Paul. No scant seconds you shall see. Come, come. A student lies on a table over a silver photographic plate. Current is applied to a machine directly above. It seems anticlimactic after the alternating current motor and the giant coils of lighting Paul saw in New York. Afterward, the plate is black, except a ghostly silver image of the student's femur. Nicholas, did you just take a picture of the inside of this man's leg? No, no, replied Leslie, not a photography, it is a shadowgraph. It records density of matter, not brightness of illuminations. On the shadowgraph, that which of greatest density is lightest, that of which is none is dark. It strips away the skin, says Agnes, and reveals the image of the bone underneath. Precisely, said Tesla. I have the author's reflections at this point. Quietly, in secret, from an impromptu subterranean laboratory in the Tennessee plains, Tesla had learned with the precious sons of Southern freedmen to engineer wonders stranger than anything Edison and his well-heeled peers might have dreamed. Paul had once thought that Edison was the most American man of his generation. But looking around the work table before him of Tesla and his students carefully considering their darkening plate, Paul saw another America. This one had been born in an impoverished Serbian village and a West Tennessee cotton field. What the first American did not invent, the second could tinker into being. Paul wanted always to live in an America in which Thomas Edison would fear a smart kid in a basement whose father had harvested enough cotton that his son might harvest volts. But this isn't the light bulb we need to beat Edison. Oh, Mr. Kravitz, who is caring about light bulbs? We have them already. Well, this is a wonder. Mr. Röntgen calls it X-ray, although I am liking my shadowgraph more clearly. This is a new thing. It is a wonder. But Paul Westinghouse is losing his lawsuit. I have the sadness about this also. Most people compete to solve a problem before the others. Tesla majored in problems that nobody had ever thought of before. Paul's problem is that nobody had ever beaten Edison before, but actually one man has. He and Agnes take a trip to Nova Scotia to visit with Alexander Graham Bell, who managed to win the race to the telephone because Edison was so busy tweaking his telegraphs. Since then, Bell has continued to make annual trips to Washington, D.C. to fend off over 600 lawsuits for his telephone. I know we're going to win. I know how. Edison is running his company into the ground, filing lawsuits against Westinghouse, and the richest man in the country owns 60% of Edison and threatens anybody who might help Westinghouse. J.P. Morgan. Agnes is key to getting Paul into Mrs. Jacob Astor's estate, and she waltzes him over to J.P. Morgan, the richest man around. But Edison is there, so they have to wait. She eventually maneuvers her way into a conversation with the 5 remaining men, isolating Morgan, so he goes to the gentleman's lounge. Paul follows him inside and locks the door. They parry words. Are you trying to rob me? No. But Paul gets Morgan to acknowledge that the war between Edison and Westinghouse is driving both of them broke and costing Morgan a fortune. Now, a licensing agreement between the two companies, would make both of them work. Morgan, but so long as Edison is at the head of Edison General Electric Company, he'll never agree on a partnership with your company. So who said Edison has to stay at the head? They meet again at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Morgan confesses there is a spy at Westinghouse, so Edison has known everything Westinghouse was up to. Reginald Fessenden, the man Paul had hired for information. Reginald must have felt that telling Paul about Tesla wouldn't help much, since Tesla was crazy. So Edison knew every step ahead of time, and Fessenden still worked with Westinghouse. Paul called Westinghouse about this and convinced him to give Fessenden a very busy work project instead of firing him, so Edison wouldn't realize they found out about him. In fact, he might be useful, since anything they told Fessenden would get to Edison. Paul has Agnes fetch Tesla back home from Tennessee in case Edison wants to kill him, and has his boss sue somebody who uses Tesla's attorney to distract him from talking to Tesla. Then he visits Charles Coffin of the Houston Electric Company, the double-crosser who gave up his AC generator to power the electric chair. Could Charles take over Edison's company and become its boss? One thing, I cannot have a company named after Edison, so we remove the name and call it General Electric. Tesla came back. Paul proposed a deal. The royalties that Tesla had been unknowingly accumulating, since he didn't care about money, could go back to save Westinghouse's company from bankruptcy. Westinghouse had built him a laboratory. If Westinghouse failed, then Edison would win and the country would go with DC current, making Tesla's current and future inventions unworkable. Agnes is furious that they're tricking Tesla into signing over his royalties and storms off, leaving a large part of her mind with Paul. Tesla signs to prevent the dystopian future Paul has outlined. He doesn't care about the money, but about a future where he can continue to invent wonders. Go forth, said Tesla as he set down the pen, and create my future. Paul goes to a bar alone and disconsolate. Agnes is gone. Winning feels like losing. He learns other backstories about the battle from others involved. All he knows is he's lost what he now realizes he really wanted, Agnes. He makes one more try. I think I'll let you find out what that is. How all this turns out, by looking them all up on the internet if you like. I thought this was a novel loosely based on reality. It actually all happened, and it turned out very well. This is a book about brilliant people who helped frame the modern world. Their battle turned out well for us. Paul was a brilliant lawyer whose practice became a model for other firms. Edison remains an idol of inventiveness about whom we've already seen movies. Agnes was a prima donna singer who fibbed her way to get her start and developed a brilliant understanding of human nature that was vital to all of this. Westinghouse and GE products are in most of our houses, and AC is the foundation of our power grid. Tesla's brilliance and singular creative genius has been compared to that of Leonardo da Vinci. These days, we often hear about Tesla in tech products, in cars and solar roof tiles. In fact, Elon Musk just launched a Tesla car into space to orbit around Jupiter this last week. The wildest thing about all this is that it is true and is still paying out for all of us. Any questions, comments?
Does the book have anything of the courtroom or the litigation or of that, or is it all?
Not too much. It just talks about he lost, and it talks about the arguments that he had with the judge and so forth. All that you can look up online.
What's Paul's last name? I missed it.
Cravath.
Cravath,
Cravath?
like almost like a cravat, but C-R-A-V-A-T-H.
I first heard that name. In '57, my sister was married to a guy named Ed Barlow, her first husband, here at First Presbyterian Church. And incidentally, that was before the committee had rules on how to decorate for weddings, you know, and back then, my mother didn't like the Ascension window, so the whole chancel was filled with palm trees. I mean, they had
Covering it up.
ferns everywhere. There's a marvelous photo of caladiums and ferns and all over there.
I didn't know he ascended amidst palm trees.
57, Ed Barlow went on to be in the Pentagon and Navy intelligence, and then after a year of wondering what to do, he went to the Yale Law School and was on the Yale Law Review, and then got a job with what was explained to me was New York's most prestigious law firm, Cravath, Swain, and Moore, you know. And
Yeah.
so when I read about Paul Cravath, I thought, oh, that's the guy, you know.
Yeah, that's the guy.
He was the founding partner of this prestigious law firm, and it was so.
He kind of set up a firm that, in a way that people hadn't before, with
Yeah.
working the interns through and helping them grow and develop in the way that you needed them to continue.
So anyway, I still haven't been able to get my hands on the book, but
You had a question. I thought I saw a hand go up over there. Yes.
Have you been watching the science program about Tesla and investigating what is thought to perhaps be his murder and his death ray, and we're using his inventions in a warfare kind of a situation?
I haven't. I wasn't aware it was happening, but that.
It's been every week. It's
What night is it, or it's on the Science Channel?
It's on the Science Channel. I don't know, maybe Sunday night, I'm not sure. But they've sent, they've got a big budget, and they've sent people over to the Soviet Union and to Eastern Europe, I guess to Serbia, where his papers went after his death. And it's very, I mean, his was that, according to this, the last years of his life were terrible. Okay, it was not a happy ending. You know, may have been a happy ending for everybody else, but not for him. And they're trying to, one, prove that he was murdered, and two, who done it. calculation.
Yeah, that sounds like a Hitlerian thing to do. I invited my cousin Story Clamp over there in the corner because he told me that Tesla was one of his favorites. And he's done a lot of engineering and making of things and very into electronics and helped my son get into computers. Helped my son build electric guitars. Any others?
Well, I was intrigued you bringing the Metropolitan Opera Star into it. I was wondering what, with you doing the review, what's the musical connection and all of this? So you managed to work one in.
Yeah, I kept thinking, well, I'm not going to get to sing unless I write something about neutrons and electrons, and I just couldn't, you know, I guess positrons, all those rhyme, so yeah, I guess I could do a song.
Didn't the lawyer marry the singer?
Well, that's what I told them they had to find out, but
Oh,
yes,
okay.
things did work out.
Yeah. You gave it away. Oh, yeah, there.
Oh my, now they don't have to read it. No, this is a fabulous book. This is just all kinds of intrigue in all kinds of ways, and it was upsetting to me to see that Edison could be kind of brutal in his approach. He was very compulsive about thoroughness and going for it and trying every single thing, and so that means he could be delayed and miss out on the telephone. Laura.
Question. Did you tell about the author when you got started, because I was late coming in? How did the author get onto this subject?
This author is into this kind of stuff. He did The Imitation Game with Benedict Cumberbatch, was in this movie at least last year about how the Allies managed to break, because he's supposedly a brilliant code person, managed to break the German secret code without the Germans knowing it, and they brought in all the different people, and this is a fabulous movie.
Well, there was a
And
book in the church library years ago, and it was something about the Enigma. And there was a book.
Enigma, yeah. Well, that's it. And they broke Enigma, and the Germans didn't know it, and that could be the key to why we won.
Wasn't that Bletchley House?
Hmm?
Wasn't that the Bletchley House in England?
Yes.
Bletchley?
Possibly.
It was, there was a show on TV,
Oh, okay.
the place was called Bletchley House, but that's where all the code breakers worked.
They had to be in some random place that people wouldn't
Where
notice.
that movie was
Yeah.
set.
That's where the movie was set.
Yeah.
He's just, Tesla is a fascinating person, and I will be surprised if this doesn't get made into a movie. It's got all the elements. Intrigue, going after somebody that everybody likes, bringing in somebody that a lot of people don't like, but because he's just too off the wall. In my research, I've seen that they thought Tesla may have been a little schizophrenic or something. But nobody says that to me when I try to calculate my dinner's weight and how it'll divide except into my mouth.
But Edison, you know, when I grew up, Edison was always a hero. This is, the one thing works against making this movie is
A lot of people won't like it.
yeah, is the disillusionment with, this is very disillusioning about the personality and the values of Thomas A. Edison. You know,
Well, there's some interesting quotes in the book from J.P. Morgan about, now I've taken away from you something about the opportunity to be able to gloat that you're above all this.
You know,
Paul.
we have a high school, Edison High School here in
Mm-hmm.
San Diego.
I don't think I'll give this air.
Well, did it take the harnessing of the electricity to be able to do the phonograph and the motion pictures?
Mhm.
Was that the beginnings of harnessing electricity?
Well, the harnessing of electricity made a lot of that possible.
Yeah,
As far as a motion picture, everybody kind of knew you could do it because you could draw little pictures on a fan of paper and flip, flip, flip and make motion. And then Edison was big on making the motion pictures work. he kept on going, he kept on inventing. And he just had his approach, which was to try everything in the whole wide world, even after you figured it out, just to make sure there wasn't something better. But that would just,
But did he have to do the light bulb before he did the phonograph?
yeah, well, he did the light bulb early,
Chronology of his inventions.
and everybody was working on the light bulb. And so the big thing that he did wrong to me is that he pretended he'd got it when he really hadn't, so everybody else would give up.
And then George Westinghouse had the brakes for the railroad cars.
Yeah, George Westinghouse made all his money in railroad car technology and doing all of that, so he was rich, but he was trying to invent in these other directions, and Edison was no way. So it was his railroad brakes that helped carry him through this incredible cost of his lawsuits.
Well, was Westinghouse a native New Yorker? I didn't really catch on if he was from New York or New Jersey or.
I'm not sure, he was somewhere up there.
I'll have to
Had to be right in the core of all that busy
Eastern.
rail lines where everybody would want to be manufacturing the trains and using them. Kind of the focus of all that. Any other thoughts, comments? I'd say read the book. This was a fascinating, fascinating book.
Because in the back, he gave credit to real biographies. This was sort of fictionalized, but in the back, in the biography, he said he did a lot of research.
He did a bunch of research and said, this part that I said here, I actually put here because it made more sense and it tied things together. I speeded some things up and I moved some things around, which is saying essentially that all that stuff was true, that he used it, but he may have put it in a little different order just for the drama. Which is, I thought it was, wasn't that a nice novel? I wonder how much of it is true. And then at the end he's saying, well, a couple things I twisted a little bit. And that's what he did with that imitation game too. All that was true. He just had to,
What was that all about?
that was breaking Hitler's Nazi code. So they'd be sending out their instructions and the Americans would intercept it and know what he was going to do. And they probably sometimes had to not follow through on it and let people die, because if you followed through every time, then the Germans would realize you'd figured it out.
That's what Churchill did.
Well, they had a machine that coded things, and it was using the alphabet, but it was all scrambled.
It was probably all scrambled, and then it would scramble with time different ways so that you could always be ahead of it. This was just totally fascinating to me. Yes.
It says the hunting, the murder of Tesla was done by the Discovery Channel, and then they gave the Science Channel the right to rerun it.
Oh, okay.
It's on Monday nights.
Oh, okay.
And so,
And it's still happening.
well, the rerun.
The
on
reruns,
the
yeah.
Science Channel, but the Discovery Channel was the one who, it's great. And you can maybe look at either place.
I'll try to look that up.
Well,
To me, it's exciting when you read stuff like this and you get exciting about areas of investigation you never thought of before. And to me, it was exciting to think all these brilliant people. And I'd gone through, and at the end I said, wait a minute, she was brilliant. She managed to make it all come together. She managed to know how to hook people up. They were all fascinating in their own
The
totally
machine
different
that he
directions.
used to do, I assume that was an X-ray that he made.
Yeah.
Was it just a machine above the man, or did it?
It was above him, and the guy was lying on a photographic plate.
I remember as a small child, I don't know what they were X-raying, but lying on the table, and this thing came down toward me, and I was absolutely, I mean, I screamed my head off. I just thought, it was gonna flatten me, but I can remember that kind of X-ray.
Mhm. That's the best way to get somebody to hold still, unless you scare them.
I can't figure
well,
out
I
what being
remember
X-ray.
we took my brother to Dr. Walpole's office when he was in the South Texas building, and Frank had to get an X-ray where he laid on the table, and they were taking a picture of the little valve in his stomach, because he was throwing up, and they figured he shouldn't be drinking milk, so they put him on soy formula. But it was an X-ray to show the valve in his stomach that wasn't functioning right. And I remember it was a flat table, and everything came down to Dr. Walpole's. Couldn't do that.
But who would think of things like that? And Who would think about cell telephones? Like, who could care about that?
It's fascinating where we've come and where it came from.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.